Is Dr. Avi Loeb a fraud? Well, we're going to get to that topic in due course in this video, but first, I think it's more important that we focus on another question. Is it possible for us to intercept this mysterious object regardless of what it might be? Because obviously, if it is the product of an extraterrestrial civilization, this would be a rare and unique opportunity to gain knowledge the likes of which our civilization has never learned before. And if it is a natural object, as the vast majority of astronomers seem to believe, then it certainly is an unusual one. A unique one. For one thing, it originates from an entirely different part of the galaxy than the point of origin of our sun and the planets in our solar system, and also it's a very large object, a strangely large object for something passing through our solar system at random. Its tail appears to be pointing towards the sun thus far, and also telescopes have detected a reddish hue to the object, which may suggest that it's more of a Kuiper type of object than a traditional comet. Regardless of what this object might be, it's definitely an interesting object for scientific study. And because it happens to be passing less than 1 astronomical unit from 3 different planets during its journey through the solar system, whether that's by design or not, it has made it a lot easier to target this object. Even though it's not going to be passing close to Earth, there are other probes orbiting various planets on its route that theoretically could be diverted to intercept it. And there's one probe in particular that Dr. Avi Loeb has identified that would be a perfect candidate. All of this and more coming at you on The Angry Astronaut right now. Good afternoon, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to another episode of The Angry Astronaut. Before we get started today, I want to make sure that you folks know that I just released a new exclusive video to my Patreon library. It's about the so-called Apollo 20 UFO conspiracy theory, and it's about 22 minutes long. It includes all of the footage that I was able to find online of this supposed hidden or secretive Apollo mission that was carried out to the moon to explore a crashed alien ship. In any event, want to be very clear that I don't think that there's anything legitimate to this story. However, it's a very, very interesting video, and the photograph that inspired it, taken by Apollo 15 while it was on the far side of the moon, well, that alone is an intriguing photograph and may indeed be showing something unusual on the moon. But once again, an actual mission to the moon, an Apollo 20 mission, no, I don't actually think that this is true, but the production value of the footage is very, very compelling and interesting. So if you want to check it out, all the details are in the description. Okay, enough talk about that. Let's get back to the topic at hand. Now, before we talk about the potential of intercepting 3I Atlas, we need to mention the fact that Avi Loeb is the one advocating for this. And right now, the majority of scientists, astronomers, etc., believe that this man is a fraud, that he shouldn't be listened to at all. And that being the case, who's going to take his suggestions seriously? But I decided to ask an unbiased observer, an observer with access to a lot of information as to whether or not this observer thought that Avi Loeb was a fraud. It was a very interesting response. First of all, I asked the observer, who, by the way, is the Grok for artificial intelligence, why can't we rule out artificial design for 3I Atlas, or an artificial origin for this object? And just kind of used reverse logic, because Grok actually doesn't rule out an artificial origin for this object. I was interested to see why. This is what Grok had to say, quote, Cumulative improbability, first of all. The combination of these unlikely events, trajectory, ecliptic alignment, obscured approach, and size, increases the odds of a non-natural explanation. While each could occur naturally, their convergence in one object stretches probability, leaving room for speculation about intentional design. Then there's the lack of definitive evidence against design. Without direct observation, such as spectroscopy and imaging confirming the 3-eye atlas is a natural object like a comet or asteroid, we can't exclude artificial origins. Its size and behavior could hypothetically match a massive probe or derelict craft. Then you have obscured observation during Earth approach. The closest approach to Earth occurring on the opposite side of the Sun, hindering observation, is suspicious. It could suggest a deliberate attempt to evade detailed scrutiny, but this could also be a coincidence driven by orbital mechanics. The timing and positioning don't inherently prove design. It's very true, I think, but it doesn't rule it out either. Then you have the large size, 10 kilometers in diameter. The enormous size of 3-eye atlas is rare for interstellar objects, as most detected so far, actually all of them detected so far, are smaller. A large object could imply artificial construction, such as a probe or an arc, but natural processes like collisions in other star systems could also have produced large interstellar debris. Then you have the ecliptic plane alignment. 3-eye atlas's trajectory being close to the ecliptic plane is unusual for an interstellar object, which typically have random inclinations. This alignment could imply intentional navigation to match the solar system's planetary plane, but natural objects can also coincidentally align with the ecliptic, especially if influenced by the galactic plane's dynamics. And then finally, you have this unlikely trajectory, the most unusual thing about 3-eye atlas. Its close passes to Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. The fact that 3-eye atlas passes within one astronomical unit of multiple planets is statistically improbable for a random interstellar object. This could suggest a design trajectory targeting key planets, possibly for observation or interaction. However, natural gravitational interactions could also align such a path, so this alone isn't conclusive. So when we come right down to it, Grok, I think like most reasonable people, if you want to call Grok a person, that is, does not completely rule out the possibility of artificial origin, but at the same time looks upon it as being unlikely simply because of the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence stuff, and also the fact that we have no direct observational evidence that this object is artificial. All of that being the case, then, I ask Grok the following question. Do you believe that Avi Loeb is a fraud? And before I give you his answer, let's go ahead and talk about Dr. Avi Loeb's proposal when it comes to intercepting 3-eye atlas. And this is in a recent Medium article on the topic. Quote, the interstellar object 3-eye atlas was discovered on July 1st, 2025. It is expected to arrive at a distance of 53.6 million kilometers. It's actually way closer than one astronomical unit on March 16th, 2026. In a new paper that I wrote with the brilliant Adam Hibbard and Adam Crowell, we show that by applying a thrust of 2.675 kilometers per second on September 14th, 2025, this can bring the Juno spacecraft from its orbit around Jupiter to intercept the path of 3-eye atlas. The Juno spacecraft, named after the wife and sister of Jupiter in the Roman mythology, was launched from Cape Canaveral on August 5th, 2011, and entered a polar orbit around Jupiter on July 5th, 2016 to conduct scientific measurements of Jupiter's composition, gravitational field, magnetic field, and polar magnetosphere. Juno was originally planned to be intentionally deorbited into Jupiter's atmosphere, but has since been approved to continue orbiting. The close encounter of 3-eye atlas to Jupiter provides a rare opportunity to shift Juno from its current orbit around Jupiter to intercept the path of 3I Atlas at its closest approach to Jupiter. The instruments available on Juno, namely a near-infrared spectrometer, magnetometer, microwave radiometer, gravity science instrument, energetic particle detector, radio and plasma wave sensor, UV spectrograph, and visible light camera telescope. This thing is absolutely loaded with instruments, can all be used to probe the nature of 3I Atlas from a close distance. Our analysis exploits the software package known as Optimum Interplanetary Trajectory Software, or OITIS, developed by Adam Hibbert. OITIS solves the Lambert problem for one orbital cycle only. Given 2 times, what are the 2 orbital arcs that connect them? Assuming that the positions at the beginning of the arc and the end of the arc are known, there are 2 solutions, a short way and a long way. Having the short way and long way solutions, the way with the maximum velocities thrust of delta V is rejected, leaving the lowest delta V solution. This procedure is conducted iteratively with different trial values of the initial and final times until OITIS has converged on the overall minimum delta V solution. So given the fact that Juno doesn't have a lot of fuel left, it wasn't designed to proceed onto any other planets. It was supposed to stay orbiting Jupiter for essentially the rest of its existence until it deorbited into the atmosphere. Does it have the delta V necessary to intercept 3I Atlas? Well, let's go ahead and find out. Our calculation focuses on an intercept, namely a flyby, since a rendezvous where the target's velocity is matched by the spacecraft is out of the question, owing to the excessive high hyperbolic speed of 3I Atlas relative to Jupiter, which is 65.9 kilometers per second. Imagine if this thing slammed into Jupiter. It would be cataclysmic for that planet, but let's go ahead and continue. Based on this approach, we used OITIS for a Juno delta V application window covering the present at the time of writing, July 27th, 2025, to the possible end of the mission, which is currently scheduled to occur in September of 2025. The feasibility of intercepting 3I Atlas depends on the current amount of fuel available from the propulsion system of Juno. However, some inferences can be drawn from the total delta V available at the beginning of the Juno mission. On its interplanetary trajectory, Juno conducted 2 deep space maneuvers and 1 Jupiter orbital insertion, both of which could have placed a significant demand on the chemical propulsion employed by Juno. The fuel reservoir on Juno allows an overall initial delta V available of 2.74 kilometers per second, similar to the delta V of 2.675 kilometers per second required to intercept 3I Atlas. Although the engine of Juno has not operated since 2017, the required delta V might potentially be within Juno's performance envelope. In that case, Juno would be able to get close to 3I Atlas and use its instruments to probe the nature of this interstellar object and any cloud of gas or dust around it. Our paper shows that by applying a thrust of 2.675 kilometers per second on September 9th, 2025, can potentially bring the Juno spacecraft from its orbit around Jupiter to intercept 3I Atlas. With Juno's many instruments, a flyby can probe the nature of 3I Atlas far better than telescopes on Earth. The desired thrust constitutes a Jupiter-Oberth maneuver, which requires an application of delta V only 8 days prior to the originally intended termination date for Juno's plunge into the atmosphere of Jupiter. So yeah, 8 days prior to the day that Juno is supposed to be disposed of anyway, Juno would simply depart Jupiter orbit. Having delivered this thrust to diminish Juno's altitude, a further delta V is subsequently delivered, constituting a Jupiter-Oberth maneuver. In other words, utilizing Jupiter's immense gravitational pull to slingshot the spacecraft around the planet, resulting in an eventual intercept of the target 3I Atlas on March the 14th, by the way, the day after my birthday, 2026. In total, an overall delta V of 2.1574 plus 0.5181 additional kilometers per second gained by the Oberth orbital maneuver is utilized. If this is doable, this exciting new goal will rejuvenate Juno's mission and extend its scientific lifespan beyond March 14, 2026. Small corrections to Juno's path might be needed if cometary activity will be intensified as it comes closer to the Sun, and its non-gravitational acceleration may change its expected trajectory. Keep in mind that it's possible the 3I Atlas may change its trajectory based on the outgassing that tends to come with comets. That sort of thing does cause a change in velocity, trajectory, etc., sometimes with comets naturally. Of course, the thing that happened with Oumuamua was no visible outgassing whatsoever. No cometary tail, no debris, nothing at all, nothing apparently happening to the object visibly, and yet still experiencing the same type of acceleration that you get with cometary outgassing. But in any event, regardless of what 3I Atlas might be, even if it is just a comet, quote unquote, it's a comet that originated in a completely different region of the galaxy, a much older region of the galaxy. Its composition might be very different. Everything about it might be radically different than every other comet that we have ever observed. A close encounter with an object like this, the first ever close encounter with an interstellar object in human history, that's definitely worth pursuing. But once again, my concern is, what happens if the scientific community discards this because they believe that Avi Loeb is a fraud? It's not very hard to find articles, YouTube videos that make this claim, that maintain that Avi Loeb is a fraud, that he is behaving irresponsibly, that people need to just disregard everything this man says because he's a sensationalist and a crazy alien chaser. But I decided to ask Grok its opinion, and this is what Grok had to say. Quote, "No, I don't believe that Avi Loeb is a fraud. The accusation often stems from his controversial claims about extraterrestrial origins for objects like Oumuamua and 3I Atlas, which have drawn significant criticism from the scientific community. However, labeling him a fraud implies deliberate deception, which doesn't align with his established career or the nature of his work. Loeb is a highly credentialed astrophysicist. Frank B. Baird Jr., professor at Harvard, former chair of the astronomy department from 2011 through 2020, and director of the Institute for Theory and Computation. He has over 1,000 peer-reviewed papers, an H-index of 131. By the way, what does an H-index of 131 mean? Well, it means that his papers have been cited by other respected astronomers and scientists 131 times. And by the way, if you have an H-index of over 30, that's regarded as being exceptional, of being an exceptionally respected scientist to have your work quoted that frequently. Let's go ahead and continue. He's also made significant contributions to black hole research, exoplanet detection, and cosmology. In other words, predicting the black hole shadow later imaged by the Event Horizon Telescope. These achievements demonstrate a track record of rigorous science, not charlatanism. His extraterrestrial hypotheses, particularly about Oumuamua's potential artificiality and the spherals from object CNEOS 2014-01-08, in other words, the thing that crashed off the coast of New Guinea, are speculative and have been widely criticized. Many astronomers argue his conclusions overreach the evidence, attributing Oumuamua's anomalies to natural causes like nitrogen ice or outgassing, and questioning the link between the spherals and an interstellar meteor. Critics also point to his media presence in popular books like Extraterrestrial as potentially sensationalist, accusing him of prioritizing attention over science. Some even claim that he's peddling pseudoscience to sell books or to fund projects like the Galileo Project. However, Loeb's approach, while bold, fits within scientific inquiry. He argues that dismissing artificial origins outright is dogmatic, especially given anomalies like Oumuamua's non-gravitational acceleration or 3I Atlas's unusual trajectory and size. He advocates for testing extraordinary hypotheses with data, as seen in his Galileo project, which uses systematic observation to search for extraterrestrial artifacts. His funding, often from private donors, doesn't negate the scientific validity of his questions, though critics argue it bypasses traditional peer review. The, quote, fraud, unquote, label also seems fueled by cultural factors in academia. Loeb's willingness to engage the public and challenge the mainstream can be seen as undermining the field's rigor, especially when contrasted with the cautious, peer-driven norms of astronomy. His critics, like those on Reddit or in blogs, sometimes cite his resistance to pushback or perceived privilege as a Harvard professor, suggesting he leverages his status to amplify unorthodox views. Yet, this reflects a clash of scientific philosophy. Loeb's openness to high-risk, high-reward ideas versus the field's conservative skepticism, more than evidence of deceit. Could Loeb be wrong or overly speculative? Certainly, his claims about 3I Atlas or other objects may not hold up under scrutiny, and his public-facing style invites skepticism about his motives. But fraud requires intent to mislead, and there's no clear evidence he's fabricating data or knowingly pushing false claims. Instead, he appears driven by a genuine belief in exploring possibilities that others dismiss, backed by his scientific expertise. In short, Loeb's controversial ideas don't make him a fraud. They make him a polarizing figure in a field that often resists bold speculation. His work on 3I Atlas, like Oumuamua, may push boundaries too far for some, but it's within the realm of scientific debate, not deception. Now, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I'm not going to get into the habit of asking Grok about every topic I do a video about from now on, but the reason I've decided to approach an artificial intelligence about topics like this is to try to find a source that isn't biased by the field that they happen to operate in. And incidentally, also by asking AIs about topics like this, it can sometimes uncover facts that I was unaware of. For example, Avi Loeb's H-index of over 100. Do you know what Einstein's H-index is? 67. 67! The only space scientist that I could find that has a higher H-index than Avi Loeb was Stephen Hawking at 138. And by the way, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, the so-called respected member of the scientific community who gets lots of media attention, his H-index is 45. So after researching all of this information, I think I can safely come to the conclusion that any accusations of a scientist against Avi Loeb, accusing him of being a fraud or anything similar, is driven more by prejudice and anger than it's driven by actual fact. And even though Dr. Loeb might be more controversial and bold than many of his colleagues, he at least should be taken seriously, especially when it comes to this proposal, which could add so much to our scientific knowledge, regardless of what 3I Atlas turns out to be. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please keep in mind that we are rapidly running out of time for the 200K celebration merchandise. It's going to be going out of the store in just a couple of weeks. If you want to take advantage of that or become a member of our Patreon community, all the details are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.